This exhibit will explore the different roles that President Obama assumed on the domestic stage, as well as the associated leadership challenges he faced in relation to Congress, the public, and the media throughout his 8 years in office. The architecture of the building is suggestive. First, the main back wall curves in the shape of a pendulum to embody the idea that political power is always shifting between parties. Second, the spiraling ramp around which the exhibit is structured begins on the top level and goes down, simulating the passage of time as the visitors make their way through a timeline of Obama's presidency. The visitor enters the exhibit through a wide hallway where they will be introduced to the four roles of the president by seeing the words, "A president is a national leader, a party leader, an agenda setter, and a public personality." Under each of these roles will be a video displaying an Obama speech which typifies that role, accompanied by questions to help guide the visitor through the rest of the exhibit. Upon leaving the hallway, the visitor will immediately see a glass wall which is blue from one view and red from the other. This shifting display of light and color will embody the idea that Obama came into office with a blue Democratic Congress and left the presidency with a red Republican Congress. Depending on where you are standing, the wall will shed either red or blue light onto the exhibit, continually reminding the audience that Obama had different opportunities and constraints throughout his presidency. The inner wall will explore these themes of opportunity and constraint by narrating Obama's relations with Congress, the public, and the media. The first half of the inner wall will be a snapshot of Obama's first term that highlights key legislative accomplishments passed on a partisan Democratic basis, including the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The wall will incorporate charts that visually show the changing party composition of Congress throughout the first term. These charts of the early years of the presidency will demonstrate the early opportunities presented by a Democratic Congress. In addition to showing the opportunity that Obama had during his first term, it will also be a place to discuss the role of the president in setting the agenda for his party. Though the president does not create law, he can influence the shape of the country by encouraging the party to deal with certain issues and therefore increasing the issue's salience in the public. The wall also discusses Obama's first-term Supreme Court nominations of Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, but which both passed easily with a Democratic Congress. This will be a place to discuss the nominations made and positions filled by the president and how those appointments are part of the president's influence in office. The wall will also have examples of Obama as a public personality, his use of various forms of media, and the way the people interacted with him. There will be examples of tension as typified with the birthers movement. There will also be examples of positive interaction between the president and the public, including his Reddit interview and his Instagram and Facebook accounts, which are just a few of many ways that President Obama used the internet to connect with his constituents. On the other wall, there will be an alcove highlighting the theme of early opportunities, which will use the Affordable Care Act to discuss the role of the president as an agenda setter in greater detail. Obama's call to bipartisanship will be discussed, along with the fact that the bill ultimately passed without a single Republican vote. The role of the media in influencing public support, or lack thereof, is also an important part of the story. This alcove will discuss interest groups to show visitors that even with the support of Congress, the president must still compromise and collaborate with others in creating coalitions and setting an agenda. Between the ACA alcove and the first-term wall, there will be a kiosk detailing the historical context, where the museum attendee can explore past presidents' relationship with the public, from FDR's fireside chats to Truman's whistle-stop campaign to JFK's use of television. This pedestal will contextualize the discussion of how the internet, social media, and various other news sites have changed the president's relation to the public and the significance of the president as a public personality. At the bottom of the pendulum, there will be an alcove that deals with redistricting and gerrymandering. Not only is this an important issue to the former President Obama, but this will become a place to look at the ways that the structures of government can influence outcomes of elections and other issues, including polarization, throughout a presidency. There will also be a redistricting game, with a variety of tasks for visitors to try and accomplish, including redrawing district maps to create a fair election, a Democratic victory, or a Republican victory. This game will show the ease with which slight structural changes can greatly change the trajectory of American politics. At the halfway point of our exhibit, there will be a partisanship quiz. 4 screens will allow several people to take the quiz at once. In the middle of the screens will be 7 colored tubes with marbles that display the results of the quiz. The display of visitor responses will show that there is a spectrum of political beliefs as opposed to a binary one. This will also show that even within one of the major parties, there are various groups with their own interests, values, and priorities. On the inner wall, there will be a window into the Oval Office. This window will be colored blue and red like the outer wall to demonstrate the subjective nature of the presidency depending on who holds the office and who is viewing it. Those outside can look into the Oval Office from the perspective of the president in order to facilitate both an understanding of the president and to foster a place for future leaders to imagine themselves in that position. On the inner wall, there will be a timeline of Obama's second term that mirrors the content from the first half of the timeline, but with the newly Republican Congress. This new context changes the story. The second term timeline will look at increased bipartisanship on smaller issues, but continued voting on party lines when it comes to important legislation. The overturn of Obama's veto for the first time will also be discussed and contextualized. In contrast to the Supreme Court nominations from the first term, the nomination of Merrick Garland was extremely heated and controversial. Republican obstruction actually stopped the hearing from ever taking place, which kept the position open until the next presidential election, allowing the Republican President Donald Trump to fill the seat. This case study provides an interesting example of how the changing party composition of Congress greatly influences the opportunities and constraints for the president's actions. The next alcove begins to examine the increasing constraint that Obama faced by exploring the 2013 government shutdown over budgeting issues. It will examine the roles of agencies in a presidency and look at what happened when those agencies were shut down. Once again, media coverage of these events will be considered as an important factor in influencing both the shutdown of the government and the resumption of normal political life. Because the budget became such an issue between the president and Congress, the alcove will have a game that shows the complexities of governmental budgeting. This game will allow visitors to consider the importance of compromise, but also the necessity of prioritization when attempting to balance such a budget. The second historical pedestal gives a history of polarization in Congress. The pedestal will encourage the visitor to explore the ways in which polarization can modify and diminish the legacy of a past president. A short video visualizing the voting records of Congress will help to contextualize the fact that although polarization is not a new phenomenon, it is on an upward trend in American politics, as Congress is becoming increasingly dogmatic about voting on party lines. As the attendee leaves the museum, they will exit through a section that deals with presidential legacy. It will reiterate the discussion about the 4 roles of the president as outlined at the beginning. It will explore Obama's role as a party leader in support of Hillary Clinton's campaign for president. It will think about the president as a national leader as it discusses Obama's call to unify after the 2016 election. It will show Obama's continued role in the spotlight and how he is still a public personality, and it will consider how the issues that he speaks out will influence the agenda of Democrat congressmen and future Democratic presidents. The visitor will leave the exhibit by walking around or through the Oval Office, depending on if there is programming going on in there. This will be a situation room where school groups and others can reserve time in the office to role-play scenarios that the president might face while in office. In addition to being a model of the Oval Office and Situation Room, this space will also serve as the site for our community outreach program. Students from the Chicagoland area will be put into a model Congress where they will work together to solve issues put before them by a panel of judges. The Situation Room in this section of the exhibit can serve as a meeting place for certain individuals in the simulation, namely the president and his cabinet. The whole model Congress can use the much larger forum area as a place to meet. As the visitor leaves the exhibit, they will be ruminating on the complexities inherent in the role of president. Additionally, they will be thinking about the ways that Obama navigated these complexities in his capacity as a party leader, national leader, public personality, and agenda setter. As Obama continues to inhabit those offices in his post-presidential life, the legacy portion will expand to show that the president's role does not end along with his time in office.